In this episode of Dr. Chess Adventures, it's all about defending against knight forks. Here we trade bishop for knight there. Gonna get aggressive with the d-pawn. White takes a little different line. Gets a knight in good position. We're gonna go in the attack there. Now remember, we have f7 defended by the king, but we don't really like that a lot. Plan was, if white takes with the d-pawn, to attack with the queen and the rook. They do. We go ahead and trade queens. Not necessarily the best there, but we are going to follow it up with a castle queenside.
Queenside castling.
Putting pressure on white. And what this kind of does is it takes away from their development a little bit. A little bit, not a ton. The reason we captured there with the bishop is if white goes for the fork, we get compensation. However, white decided to attack our bishop, which is actually pretty good. So we played our bishop back to d5. And we got hit with the pawn. Now remember, the knight protects the pawn on c4, so we got to back up. We're defending f7 because that's where the fork is. White brings his knight out. We're going to take a second defender for f7. We're going to play the knight to h6. Now remember, the g7 pawn is under attack, so we don't necessarily want to get our dark squared bishop up. So we got a lot of defense issues here. Now white brings in the knight. There's a lot of options white's knights have. We also have to worry about a7. So we're going to play king to b8. Okay. White moves his king out of the way, and the idea behind that is to lock up its rooks. So here's where we go in the attack. If you said f7 pawn to f6, that's correct. Putting pressure on the knight, forcing them to move. Not a lot of good options here for the knight. I mean, one option, well, basically, there's basically two options. One is d3, the other is f3. F3 is obviously going to be better. We get lucky here. White chose d3. Opens the door for a nice little fork by the bishop of both knights. And here there's a number of ways we can go. I think rook takes is good because we threaten two pieces. Didn't go that route in the game, though. Actually took with the bishop. Wanted to get rid of that knight. White went to protect the other knight. Here we can go ahead and take the knight and trade because we're getting two pieces for one. And at this point, we're up basically a knight and a bishop. And from there on, we were actually forced to capture here because we don't really have a defender on the back row. So if we move this, we're kind of in a bad position if we, were to go that way. So even though we have more material, we're not using half of it. So we don't want to do that. We're going to have to take with the rook, which is what we did right there. Okay. Going to play the bishop to e7. And white plays the rook in the best spot it could. But we can defend that with a knight. And okay, now our bishop is under pressure, but that's okay. We can delay that with a check by the knight. We can follow it up with another check from the pawn. And another check right there. Check by the knight. Back to where we were. And now we can play the bishop to d7 as it's protected by the rook. And after that exchange right there, white decides to resign because there's not really anything it could do offensively, and we got a pawn on the h-file going all the way up to get become a queen.